Hey button pushers, my name is Nick and welcome to DeLight. Now, I stumbled across this on Steam and it looked really quite cool, so I thought let's give this a play and see exactly what it's about, shall we? You are Sammy. Sammy is blind and she has a stray dog with her called Deli, which is a great dog name. And the game starts you off kind of throwing you in the deep end. So you are in the darkness with somebody called Macadam and you're having to sneak past guards to get to a train that will take you supposedly away from the area that you currently are. It seems straightforward enough, but it's not. Things happen, Macadam gets in trouble, but as you kind of make it to the train, there's a little time jump and you go back in time. So you go back about 2 weeks when everything was normal and you could see, which was peculiar. So something weird obviously happens within the last fortnight that has put soldiers everywhere and has made you go blind, which is intriguing. But either way, you are now non-vision impaired, Sammy, and you go and play with your friends. And this is a clever way of introducing you to the full gameplay mechanics. So you decide to play a game of hide and seek, but to make it more interesting, you do it with a blindfold. So it kind of gives you a better indication on how the game's gonna look and feel with the cone of vision around you. I'll talk more about the gameplay stuff in a moment. While you're playing with your friends, this is also your first introduction to Deli before he becomes Deli, when he's just a random stray dog. Once you finish playing, you hear this little scuffle and see poor little Deli being kicked by the local bully called Bert. He's probably just angry because he's called Bert. So you decide you just stand up for him, protect him, and the bully scarpers after throwing a rock in my face, which is just bloody rude. Pretty soon after that, one of your friends, Edgar, his mum comes along and says that they need to go home, like, now, and she suggests that everyone else also heads home now, because something's happening. So, a little bit ominous, sure, but you head home, speak to your grandpa, who you live with, and while you're having a little chat, there's a news report that comes on the TV that says war has been declared in your area, which is not good. So from the sounds of it, from his reaction, it sounds like this is something that's been brewing for a while, but obviously you're a kid, you're not involved in any of the adult conversations about what's going on, so this has all kind of come as a real shock to you. So your grandpa decides, okay, we need to scarper. Your mum and dad, or mama and papa, they live in a different area, so I'm not sure what the dynamic is and why you're living with your grandpa as opposed to them, but you are. So they're living in a different area that's not affected by the war. So grandpa tells you to pack up some stuff and we're heading to the underground station because we can get a train out and we'll be safe. And things have escalated quick. Just in the little bit of time it's taken to pack after seeing the news report, there's traffic everywhere, there's soldiers, we even bumped into some resistance fighters as well, which was a bit scary because I thought we were going to get shot. I'm glad we didn't, but you know, they looked shooty kind. So when you arrive in the underground station, there's obviously a load of people there having the same thoughts as you. They're just trying to get out of Dodge, so it's really busy. You and Grandpa are queuing up, and while you're waiting, Deli strolls in, and obviously Sammy, being a kid, wants to go and say goodbye to Deli for the last time because doesn't know if she'll ever see him again. As soon as she goes over to him, kaboom. Something happens. Train station, just fully explodes, plunges everything into complete darkness, and separates you from Grandpa. So you need to try and find him while stumbling around in the dark. I'm not entirely sure how Grandpa ended up quite so far away from you, but he did, and it takes a while to find him, but it's a really good way of the game setting the scene and throwing a few different mechanics at you. So there's a section where you actually play as Deli, which is pretty neat. So chapter 1 ends with you finding Grandpa, and a mysterious person comes along and rescues you from the rubble of the train station. And then chapter 2 starts, and I was very confused for a little while in the start of chapter 2. It took me a while to kind of grasp what was going on and what had happened. So as soon as you start chapter 2, you've already got a bandage on your eyes. So at no point up until now have I mentioned anything about my eyes. Nobody seems to know why I've gone blind either. They assume it's to do with the explosion in the underground. That may very well be the case. I just assumed in chapter 1 that it was because you are underground, there's been an explosion, it's dark. But it could be that you had lost your sight then. I'm not sure. It's really not very clear, but I was very confused for a while. I was kind of expecting a little time jump, but there wasn't a time jump. It was just, it followed. But now you're fully blind and have just accepted the fact you're blind. Chapter 2 split into a few different days, and it kind of just feels like a prolonged tutorial in how to be blind. Literally the first day you are just, for want of a better phrase, blindly stumbling around this school that's been turned into a shelter, just trying to learn the layout of everything and then delivering food to certain people, which is quite clever the way it's done, but they really do leave you to it to feel around and try and remember where things are and which hallway leads to which room. It's a learning experience. As you go on in the school towards the later part of chapter 2, you speak to an old boy called Rick. He basically knows the area really, really well. He knows how to get to your parents' house, but to get there, it ain't gonna be easy. So you need to get to the Grand Central train station to get on a refugee train out of town. But to do that, you need to get through multiple military checkpoints and also avoid the resistance fighters, because where the resistance fighters are, there's going to be fighting, and you are a blind child. So, you know, your odds aren't great. You decide you need to get out of school, you need to try and get to the train station before it gets shut down properly, and then get to safety at your parents' house. I imagine the story's going to end up looping back to where we were right at the start, so I'd be interested to see how that plays out. So it's just chapter 1 and 2 that are available at the moment. Chapter 3 is due to come out end of December, chapter 4 is due to come out end of January, chapter 5 is meant to come out end of February. It could be a little while until we find out for sure, but I'm intrigued by the story. I want to see how this plays out. So the way the game actually plays out is admittedly quite unique, and the visual elements of it have been done really well for the most part, but it just feels a bit unpolished at the moment, and there's some items that kind of bleed in and out of existence when they shouldn't do. So the idea behind it is you are just shrouded in darkness. As you get close to something, it will kind of phase in, and then as you get away from it, it will phase out. Sometimes things don't. They kind of disappear, or they'll appear and then they won't appear, and it gets a little confusing at times. And also there were some moments where I could fully just walk through walls, which was interesting because magical powers. If you can't see the wall, it's not there. One of the coolest little touches though is there are certain things of the game where you walk towards it thinking it's one thing, because if you couldn't see it you would think maybe it is this thing. Like, there's the two best examples. There's a lady playing a piano, and you start talking to her, and it turns out it's just a radio playing classical music. And there's a bin that smells really, really bad, and if you interact with it, it turns out it's actually just a big smelly person. So it's like, things like that, they're a nice little touch. I liked them. That was a clever use of the game design. There's also a few quick time style events scattered throughout the game. You either dodge out the way of something, or, you know, quick time events where you press a button at the right time, but they're quite cool. They're different. It kind of helps keep the gameplay just a little bit more varied. So there's not been many of them yet, but a big part of the game, I imagine, in the later chapters are going to be the sneaking sections of the game. There's obviously some right at the beginning, and there's some towards the end of chapter 2, but yeah, we've not had a good chance to sneak around yet. But it seems like Deli is going to be a massive help with this, because you are just shrouded in darkness at all times. Deli will run ahead in the darkness and start barking to tell you where to go, which is really, really helpful. Kind of weird in sneaking sections that a barking dog is the best solution, but it works. So you need to trust Deli. You need to just head over to where they are, and there will be some sort of cover you can hide behind. So that's a cool thing. It's good to kind of work with Deli in that way. There's a few gameplay mechanics that were thrown in Chapter 1 that never kind of resurfaced again, which was weird. So I don't know whether they're going to come more into play later in the later chapters, but it kind of felt like they'd set something up and then not done anything with it. So while you're playing hide and seek and you're blindfolded, there's this whole section where you're following a scent trail, which is really cool. Like, that's a clever mechanic, but that never comes up again, which is weird. It seemed weird to have such a focus on something and then never use it again. That might come up again later on, but no idea. But there's also, in the conversation you have with Grandpa before everything goes to shit, there seems to be a real focus on consequences. So there's a few times where you get to choose what to do in a conversation. It seems like there's a focus on what you say actually matters. So if you choose to lie, it can backfire. Telling the truth could also backfire, but you don't know. So you need to be careful about how you play things. But that never really comes up again. So you have different conversations throughout the game, and there are different options you can throw into them, but it doesn't really seem to go anywhere. As is review tradition, I'm going to go through the good stuff and the bad stuff. The good stuff. Number one, it's a great concept, and when the gameplay works well, it works well. It's good settings, the sneaking seems to... it's a bit slow, the sneaking, but obviously it's sneaking, and I've not had a good chance to play with it. I mean, that has the potential to get quite stressful, which is a good thing in sneaking, so I'll be interested to see how that evolves later on in the game. Number two, the story is intriguing and has some real potential to kind of pack a massive gut punch later on in the game. I'm fully expecting for it to get quite emotional later on in the game, which is always good. If a game can deliver a gut punch like that, then well done. And the visuals of the game are really nice. The way it's been done with kind of the shrouded in darkness and things phasing in and out as you get closer to them looks really good. Obviously, as I've said, there's a few issues with it, but for the most part, it works really well. And the character designs are really cool as well. Like there's a real charm to the characters, which is adorable. So, the bad stuff. The gameplay and kind of general maneuvering, it needs a bit of polish, but it's not bad, it just needs tightening up a little bit. The sound of the game needs a little bit of work, as I was finding the music was dipping in and out a little bit at times when it potentially shouldn't have, and again, it's just a bit of polish that needs. Number three, there are some real pacing issues with Chapter 2. It felt like a bit of a chore at times, and it was kind of a lot of go here, do that. Oh, now you're here, go here and do that. But I guess it needs to be, because you need to learn how everything is. I don't know, it just felt like the pacing of it was a bit off. Either way, it's an intriguing story. The characters are great. The concept behind it is solid. Sammy especially has a real charm about her, and she has a real good sense of humour about what's happening to her, which is nice. It's also quite sad, but there's a real like heartwarming quality to it. Also, she got used to being blind real quick, so you know, good on her. Now, there's a few things that need to be polished and tightened, but say it's going to be like another month and a bit just until the next chapter comes out, and then January, February for the chapters 4 and 5. So a lot can happen in a month. Who knows? As I said, chapters 1 and 2 are available now. Chapters 3, 4 and 5 will be coming December, January, February respectively, and I am very interested to see how this unfolds. So, if you want to check this out for yourself, then the link to the Steam page is in the description. If you've disagreed with anything I've said, or you have different thoughts on the game, then let me know in the comments. If you've enjoyed this video, then why don't you go ahead and the like button, the adorable handkerchiefed doggo that is the subscribe button, make sure you that bad boy. And until next time, love you, bye.